Who are you?
I'm no one.
It's no secret that the sequel trilogy had a messy development. After all the questions asked by The Force Awakens, theories once abounded on YouTube and Reddit as the community tried to put these pieces together. Of course, changing direction and conflicting vision meant that many of these questions had less than satisfying answers. Even some of the elements that showed great promise fell flat in execution. In this video, we're looking at the worst offenders and examining the consequences of setup without payoff. Which of these setups had potential, and which were better left forgotten? Today I'm here to share with you the 10 most interesting setups with no satisfying payoff. Obviously, this video will contain spoilers for the entire sequel trilogy, so consider yourself warned.
People keep telling me they know me. No one does.
But I do.
The Knights of Ren were first teased in the months leading up to The Force Awakens. They were promised to be a new group evolving separately from both the Jedi and the Sith. Many fans were excited at the prospect of this new group, and the internet was filled with theories and speculation about them. Of course, the Knights of Ren had almost no screen time in The Force Awakens, appearing only in a flashback Force vision and a single offhanded reference from Snoke. After The Force Awakens, many of us were hoping that they'd show up in The Last Jedi. Rumors began circulating of them being spotted on set filming on Ahch-To, where they would engage in a massive battle between the Knights and Luke and Rey. Of course, all of this was false, as they somehow had even less screen time than they did in The Force Awakens, not appearing at all during the entire film. Finally, we get to see them in The Rise of Skywalker. However, the Knights of Ren turned out to be a huge letdown for most and barely played any role in the film. Seriously, all they do is walk around for a bit, capture Chewbacca, walk around some more, and then get totally wasted by Ben Solo in a mostly off-screen fight. The worst part is that the Knights of Ren actually have a really interesting culture and backstory, but the development team for the sequels was so invested in mystery rather than answers that they waited too long to tell us anything specific, and by the time they did, nobody cared.
But when I started to think that maybe there are times when mystery is more important than knowledge.
You can't be so stupid as to think this will be easy. My troops will storm this block and kill you all.
Now, Captain Phasma is a weird one. Following in the tradition of Boba Fett, we have a taciturn, caped figure who never removes their helmet and has less than 6 minutes of screen time across the 2 movies they appear in combined. Considering the minimal role Phasma played in the film, you would be forgiven in assuming that her popularity was unexpected. But that doesn't make any sense. If we remember back to the first announcement for The Force Awakens, the Chrome Trooper, as she was called before the film's release, was featured prominently in the very first wave of marketing. Phasma should have been awesome, wearing a sexy shoulder cape and armor forged from Emperor Palpatine's private Nabooian yacht, and played by the beloved Game of Thrones actress Gwendolyn Christie. Phasma was a fan favorite long before the film hit theaters. However, that favoritism quickly faded when it was realized that Phasma's role was totally hollow and her presence contributed little to the film. Again, she should have been awesome. She played an archetype that we've never seen before, the High Commander of all Stormtroopers. This was fresh territory and the potential for an intimidating villain archetype that we don't normally get to see in Star Wars, especially on the big screen. Despite the fact that Phasma had potential to be a great character, she was grossly underutilized and almost incompetent. She, the most senior officer of all Stormtroopers, is laughably defeated in the third act of The Force Awakens by an elderly smuggler and a Stormtrooper janitor. Okay, Chewbacca was there too, but still, she is the most senior high officer of all Stormtroopers and is quickly and effortlessly taken down. Even though they tried to redeem her reputation in The Last Jedi, the damage was already done by this point, and trying to make Phasma cool again was beating a dead horse. One thing that I think can be learned from the sequel trilogy is that fixing your mistakes later on is much less successful than getting it right the first time.
I disagree. What do we do with her?
Is there a garbage chute? Trash compactor?
Look, I have to go! What kind of weapon? A planet killer!
In The Rise of Skywalker, we see a fleet of ships that have been built by the Sith cultists on Exegol and prepared for Palpatine's return. The fleet is composed of a new Star Destroyer model called the Ziston Star Destroyer. Not only does the fleet itself play little actual role in the film, but the ships are each equipped with planet killers. Why? Seriously, why? They use these planet killers to kill Kijimi, but that's about it. And even that does little to progress the plot, other than to possibly suggest that Zori maybe didn't survive. But she did, so that didn't matter either. Now, the concept of Star Destroyer-mounted planet killers is an idea that comes from Legends. This is true, but it was totally unnecessary from a plot perspective. Eckhart's Ladder actually has a full video on the missed opportunity of the Zystons, and it's actually a really great video, and I highly recommend you watch it. I'm going to put a link in the description or on the iCard in the corner. You should definitely check it out after this video. I don't want to repeat anything Eckhart said here, so I'm focusing more on their narrative failure rather than their tactical missteps. From a narrative perspective, there is no reason at all that each Star Destroyer needed to be mounted with a planet killer, or that a planet killer needed to be in this film at all. I know that it was supposed to add suspense, but it actually did the exact opposite. The planet killing feature is shown to us once, and it's never used again. It doesn't even make sense from Palpatine's perspective. If Palpatine wanted to destroy everything, then he would have done so. No warning, no transmission, no setup, just let loose the fleet and win instantly. But that's not what he does. He sends out a transmission and gives a freaking doomsday countdown. If he wanted to rule the galaxy rather than destroy it, then he would know from his past failures that building planet killers is a great way to give his enemies a single target to unite against. This makes no sense from Palpatine's perspective, and it makes no sense from a script writing perspective.
I stand ready to destroy the entire moon.
That won't be necessary. We need a statement, not a manifesto.
What are you doing there, 3PO?
Taking one last look, sir. At my friends.
Star Wars has a long reputation of making new designs just for toys, and for the most part, I am totally on board with this, because it gives us a more fleshed out Star Wars universe and provides the opportunity for some really awesome ship, weapon, and droid designs. Unfortunately, Dio is an example of just how bad that can be without proper execution, especially when there is no good reason for that design to be there. Dio contributes nothing to the plot, at all, and his presence feels totally unnecessary and awkward. At least Babu Frick actually did something for the plot, but the only thing Dio does is tell Finn that Ochi was supposed to take Rey to Exegol, information that could have just as easily been learned from a datapad or Navicomputer logs or anything else, really. Dio was clearly intended to be another cute factor character, but being released within the same month as Baby Yoda and the immensely superior droid BD-1 highlighted just how unnecessary and uninteresting Dio was by comparison. Dio popularity and sales fell dramatically short and underperformed drastically compared to the others, even being outperformed by Babu Frick. Not to mention, naming him Dio inevitably draws comparisons to Dio, the nickname of an ID-10 Imperial tactical droid and a much more interesting droid companion from the Star Wars Battlefront 2 campaign. Dio was doomed to fail from the start, since he was totally irrelevant, served no purpose, and literally only said hello and no thank you. That, in conjunction with his first appearance trailing Jedi Fallen Order and The Mandalorian, ensured that Dio had no chance of success. Seriously, how can you compete with The Child and BD-1? BD literally stands for Buddy Droid, and he is indisputably the best droid.
Your memories. You risked them for me. I believe in you too, buddy.
Dear child, I see your eyes. You already know the truth.
Yeah, Maz Kanata is an interesting one. She had such a great setup as a collector of antiquities who owns a blasted castle and has been running it since before Yoda was even born. She somehow got a hold of Luke's lightsaber after he lost it on Bespin, and even stranger still is that she somehow acquired the medal that Leia clearly forgot to give Chewie. She is set up to be so interesting. What happened? She promises stories for another time, but there is no other time. Why does she even exist if they weren't going to do anything with her or explain any of the mysteries that surround her? Wasted potential at its finest.
I am no Jedi, but I know the Force.
If Skywalker returns, the new Jedi will rise.
Snoke was announced as the new big bad for the sequel trilogy, and everyone wanted to know who he was. Of course, in The Last Jedi, he was revealed to be nobody. Then, worse than nobody, he was revealed to be a puppet literally manufactured by Palpatine. I can't find it now, but I do remember Abrams saying sometime after The Force Awakens that Snoke has been waiting in the unknown regions for decades, and that he was a patient observer alive during the Galactic Civil War. I mean, I guess that can still be true if Palpatine started growing Snokes way back when he was still Emperor. And then back in the novels between The Force Awakens and Last Jedi, Palpatine was searching in the unknown regions for a dark presence that was calling out to him. This was likely intended originally to be Snoke himself, but I do believe that they probably retroactively adjusted this to be a reference to Exegol, the planet where we find Palpatine in the new movie. It's clear that there was some sort of directional shift with Snoke's role. And while it's possible that there never was a master plan at all, I do have it on good authority that Snoke was originally intended to be Darth Plagueis. However, Rian Johnson changed this because the internet figured it out and he wanted to shatter expectations. Now this may or may not be true, so please take it with a grain of salt, but I do think it's interesting that people who worked on the films are coming out and saying that Snoke was always supposed to be Plagueis. If you guys want to see a full video on that, let me know in the comments. I'd be happy to make that video if that's something you guys want to see.
We shall see. We shall see.
Are you threatening me, Master Jedi?
The Senate will decide your fate.
I am the Senate.
Palpatine returned as the big bad for Rise of Skywalker. Ultimately, this was done because Abrams wanted a central villain for Rey and Ben Solo to unite against. And with Snoke gone, they needed a new villain to help motivate Kylo Ren's return to the light and ensure that there was still a central threat for the third act of the movie. With the film already moving at breakneck speed, there really wasn't time to establish a new big bad, so they decided to resurrect an old one. Unfortunately, Palpatine's presence feels largely unnecessary and led many to complain that it redeems the Skywalker saga as the Palpatine saga.
Your feeble skills are no match for the power of the dark side.
Cherished fleet, all remaining systems will bow to the First Order!
About halfway through the film, Hux reveals himself to be the spy within the First Order. He is then promptly killed in the next scene. This felt extremely out of place and is clearly not the Hux we saw in The Force Awakens. Hux's character was heavily undermined in The Last Jedi, and it would have been very difficult to re-establish him as a serious antagonist, so instead they decided to make him a spy. Not only does this serve little purpose in the plot, but his ill-defined motivations of, I just want Kylo Ren to lose, felt like a bit of a cop-out. Force Awakens had such potential when it came to non-Force sensitive military leaders, with both Hux and Phasma having great promise. Unfortunately, neither character was given their dues, and by the time of Rise of Skywalker, had to be replaced by General Pryde as the First Order's military leader.
There will be no terms. There will be no surrender.
Hi, I'm holding for General Hux.
Frodo! Mary, it's Frodo Baggins! Hello, Frodo!
One of the new characters from the film was Beaumont Kin, played by the ever-charming Dominic Monaghan. Beaumont was introduced for the first time in Rise of Skywalker only to play an extremely minimal role. Of course, he wasn't the only supporting character to play a background role in the Resistance personality, but this was one of the biggest missed opportunities. According to the Visual Dictionary, Beaumont is an expert on Sith history and esoteric lore. Yet they never utilize his expertise. He could have very well been put to use in helping find Exegol, or giving exposition on the Sith cultists, or even using him to study the Ziston Star Destroyers, but sadly, he does none of this. Beaumont is an in-universe lore master, played by my second favorite Hobbit, so yes, that officially makes him my favorite character in the sequel trilogy, and it bums me out that he didn't get more screen time.
You're a pilot. You can fly anywhere. Why go back?
You got a family? Got a boyfriend? Cute boyfriend?
None of your business, that's why.
On paper, Finn should have been one of the most interesting characters in the sequel trilogy. I mean, a defecting stormtrooper played by the talented John Boyega. Finn had all the opportunity to be a phenomenal character. Unfortunately, Finn's story was left hanging more than once. First, there's his attempted love life. In The Force Awakens, Finn expresses interest in Rey on several occasions, and of course all of this is quickly forgotten in The Last Jedi, instead deciding to pair him with Rose. Finn and Rose then develop a full romance in The Last Jedi, only to have that also be forgotten in The Rise of Skywalker. To be fair, I don't think anyone was really complaining that Rose got brushed to the sidelines for Rise of Skywalker. In Rise of Skywalker, Finn has a new love interest in Jannah, another stormtrooper who defected from the First Order. Like Finn, Jannah was also stolen by the First Order from her family and raised to be a stormtrooper. Finally, there's Finn's unfinished line to Rey, "Rey, I never told you," and then he gets cut off. Now this one is especially weird because the conversation is brought up again by Poe and Rey several more times. I don't think it would have been nearly as odd if he had gotten interrupted, but then no one ever brought it up again. Now, Abrams reportedly came out to say that Finn was calling out to Rey to tell her that he could use the Force. However, that doesn't make much sense. While it is hinted in The Rise of Skywalker that Finn can sense the Force, these don't seem like appropriate last words, and would be even more of a letdown from a narrative perspective when you remember how often the subject is brought up. If it was something as simple as "I can use the Force," it would have been incredibly easy to just say that later on, but the fact that it isn't said and that it remains a mystery tells us that it's something way more important than "I can use the Force." If you would allow me to speculate for just a moment, I do think the film leaves hints at a truly satisfying answer. And even if it isn't the answer that was intended, I think it's an answer that both works and makes more sense from a narrative perspective. In a conversation later in the film between Finn and Poe, Finn says that Poe doesn't understand what Rey is going through, but that he does understand, and so does Leia. So what does Leia know about what Rey's going through? Well, Luke later tells Rey that Leia always knew who Rey's grandfather was, and yet she trained her anyway. I think it's at least a possibility that Finn was trying to tell Rey that he knew the truth about her parents. But anyway, that's 10 setups with no payoff on screen. Which of these questions did you wish were answered in the movies? Was there something we missed? Leave your thoughts in the comments below. Thank you, my friends, for watching, and may the lore be with you always.